So we work on complex societal issues, mostly with different stakeholder groups. So multi-stakeholder dialogues is what we do. We design and facilitate workshops, and also with large groups. What we're going to do today, the agenda or the program for this afternoon, we will do a short check-in in small groups to get to know a few of the participants here. Then we'll introduce the case. What was the case about, this future search case, the topic. And then we'll tell a bit more about what is future search and what are the principles and what is the flow of the program of a future search. And then we'll ask you to do an assignment in small groups in breakout rooms on one of the principles. Yeah, we'll do that, and then have your reflections on it. And then we'll give you a glimpse of the process of this particular case. So you get a feel, it's also with photos, so you get a feel of, hey, what is it also? And then there's space for questions and answers, and in small groups you can exchange your reflections of today, and then think of, hey, these are remaining questions. And then in the plenary, we are happy to answer your questions that are remaining. And then we check out, and that's it for the day. So the program is from now, 2 o'clock Dutch time, till 4 o'clock. Yeah. So now I think we will go in small groups. So what... do we have the next slide for that, Monique?
No, it's just a check-in question.
No, just check-in. So we ask you to go in small groups of 6, about 6, and we ask you in 3 minutes only, no, 6 minutes, 6 minutes in the small groups to share your name, who are you, where are you, and maybe your organization, and what made you join this session today. What made you join this session? So your name, your organization, maybe where you're based or where you are at now, and why you joined this session. Yes, Monique, you're probably in the backside making the breakout groups.
Yeah.
So in 6 minutes, we'll see you back here in the plenary. Just a short introductions of yourselves, and then we hear from a few of you. Okay. Well, I hope you managed to introduce all of you in your small groups. I know these 6 minutes feels very short. Can we hear from you a few insights, what you shared in your small groups? A few insights. Maybe from group 1, can you say an insight? What are maybe the similarities in why you join this meeting?
I'm not sure if I was in group 1, but I think so. But very briefly, Aileen, it was we're all interested broadly in system change, and a few of us just randomly stumbled into the event. So and specifically interested in finding out more about the connections in Amsterdam and also the network.
Okay. Yeah. So also to get to know about the Systems Innovations Hub.
Yeah.
And the network. Okay. Thank you. And curious people. What about the other groups? Some insights to share?
I don't know what group I was in, but if no one's going to say anything, I'll fill a void. Always known for that. One of the insights I picked up was that we are from, it's a global representation. You know, there are people from, somebody from India in my group. I'm from the UK. There's others from the Netherlands and elsewhere. So all interested in this topic, coming together to learn more from each other and ideally understand systems change a little bit better.
Great. Thank you, Christopher. Who would like to follow up on the example of Christopher by when there's an empty space to fill it up and sharing your insight?
I think I would like to, I first wanted to say thank you for giving us the chance to get to introduce ourselves in these small groups. I think it is a wonderful way to connect. And I think one of the things that we were discussing was that to achieve change, there I think some of us realized that more siloed attempts to change things were not working. And at least in my personal motivation to coming to this event was to understand how we can change systems, infrastructures, and what are the challenges to doing so. Because I think it's proven again and again in industry and in policymaking that doing or attempting change in more isolated environments or contexts with the same people is not working. So we need to change something about our processes to actually achieve a difference.
All right, good one. Thanks. Yeah. Anybody else? Insights from your introductory round?
Well, I would say this seems to be a very exciting community to meet interesting people. Innovation in democracy, sustainability, circular economy, refugees, bringing systems into the corporate world, all those topics were represented in the group I was. And you know, I'm reasonably new to this community, and apart from the session itself, I think we're getting a wonderful opportunity to get to know interesting people.
Nice, thank you very much. Interesting people we have amongst us, curious to each other. Anybody else? What came?
Just very short.
You?
But basically the common thread was interest in the future, which is also the topic, of course. But it could be like more in a broader sense, but also like very tangible future, like innovations, Internet of Things or AI. So that was the common thread. Yeah.
Okay. The tangible things of the future. AI, is that tangible? But yeah. Thank you. Another insight.
Well, it's not insights, but I find it interesting that a lot of us just kind of stumble in. We didn't really know what we are heading for, and that means that it's a lot of open mind here, and I'm curious really how we're emerging at this community.
Thank you, Carrie. Open-minded, don't know what you're heading for, what you're in. I hope you get a bit of an idea with the program, the agenda we showed, but it's okay if you just go through it. Last remark from somebody else?
Yeah, maybe I want to make a remark if nobody wants. But what I find hopeful is that, of course, we have a lot of challenges in the future, and sometimes, especially in the Netherlands, we are really fast with being a bit of a pessimistic about the future. And I think only like the people that were in group 5, like 5 or 6 people, I think we all were very hopeful and also open to work on this together. And I think that is something good, that there are still a lot of people that have hope in the future, and also the mindset of that we have influence on creating those futures together. So I think that was a hopeful start of this webinar conference, or how to call it, but I think that was a nice insight that I found in my group.
Thank you for sharing. Yeah. And now let's go over to showing you the case, which is also promising and hopeful for the future. Yeah, so we'll give the topic and explain a bit more about this case. And then we'll zoom in, make the connection to the process was also mentioned. We work in silos a lot. How can we improve or change our processes? Well, hopefully Future Search is a different kind of process that can break through these silos and really integrate different perspectives on a complex issue. So that's what we're going to do. Monique,
yeah,
over to you.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I'm going to present the case to you, and after that we will explain about the Future Search, about the methodology and the approach. But as some of you mentioned, it's a system approach. It means that you try to align different stakeholders around a challenge that you face that you cannot solve on your own. And the case that we are presenting is a case from the Netherlands, although we have also been doing future searches over the world, in Africa, in Asia, even in South America. But we thought, because it's the Amsterdam Hub, we present a recent case from last year that we did around nature nature inclusive agenda, and it was an initiative of the Ministry of Agriculture, Nature and Food Security in the Netherlands, together with the provinces, to recover and strengthening the Dutch nature. And so it's a very broad question, but they wanted to make a collective nationwide agenda for this purpose. And so they realized, if we need a nationwide approach, we need involvement of a broad society stakeholders. So they started in 2019 with kind of setup for this, and then they had a kind of ambition document, and it was in the Nature Top in 2019. And that ambition document that has been kind of worked out to different groups. But what was noticed during that process, that they also identified domains which are important for this process, but every domain started to work more isolated on their own domain. And the idea then came like, we have to align each other and not become like isolated initiatives. So how can we move forward as a system, and how can we make sure that we involve all the relevant stakeholders in this process, and that we don't make individual plans, but that we make a common plan, a common agenda. And so with a consortium of relevant stakeholders, they started to plan for a future search. And why a future search? Because a future search is for them was a kind of methodology where in a rather short time you can transform and align a system around the complex challenges. So of course, to protect nature, to strengthen nature, to recover nature is huge. So how can you do that with different groups in a rather short time? And a future search, they decided that that was the way forward, because it is a process that is not taking too long, although the preparation will take long, but it's a 2.5-day, 3-day conference. And there was also a bit pressure, because there was another top coming and they wanted to present this agenda, the nature inclusive agenda, to the minister. And have it adopted. So the political process gave pressure, and that also helped in saying, okay, let's do this future search and get all the stakeholders on board. So that in short is, let me go to the, and so the question of the clients is, how can we align all these different initiatives? And they chose for a future search because it's a system approach, it's transformative, and it is kind of, they also wanted to accelerate. So it can accelerate certain processes that are already ongoing. And the purpose of this future search was to accelerate the movement towards a nature inclusive agenda.
And that's also on your next slide, Monique, I think, the central question.
Yeah, the central question will come here. Sorry, I stopped. So the central question that was determined by the stakeholders themselves in the preparation was, how do we accelerate the movement towards a nature inclusive society? So that was the future search purpose. And we gathered in 2.5 days, no, 3 days around this question. And the result of this was an agenda, the content of an agenda for the nature inclusivity of the Netherlands. So we would like to explain you now what a future search is. I already gave a bit of a insight, but Eileen will tell a bit more about what is a future search conference.
Yeah, well, a future search is as well as a gedachtegoed, a sort of philosophy, and it is a methodology. And the future search conference is a 2 or 3 days program. And here you see the slide. It says a large group planning meeting, which lasts 16 to 20 hours spread over 2 or 3 days. But in the following days, that brings the whole system together, and the whole system, all the stakeholders that have something to do with these central questions. So people I always say, people who cannot sleep at night because they are worried, they are concerned about this question. They are making the system of actors, and we want them to get in the room to work on this question, and to work on a very task-focused agenda. Yeah, so that is in brief. The flow or the agenda of the future search, we said it is very task-focused, and it's very well structured, and it has these building blocks. First, it focuses on the past. Where are we coming from? Where have we been? And we do that we look at the past on a global level. What happened in the world? We do it on a personal level. What are the personal things we experienced? And we look at the topic on the topic level. What are events, things that happened around this topic? And here it was on this nature inclusiveness. Then we'll move to the present. What is happening to us right now? Where are we? In what situation are we? What are trends and influences, trends and developments that influence us with our topic? And then we own up, hey, what do we do already? And what did we not do? And what are we sorry for and proud of that we are already doing? Then we move to the future. We have a focus on the future. We build future scenarios, and then we look at, hey, what do we all want? What do we all want for this future, in this future? So we imagine, we visualize a future we want, and then we look at all the different stakeholders, and we try to distill what we all want. And this commonality in what we all want is, we look for the common ground. And that is the dialogue about, the common ground dialogue, which is a very special part of this, of a future search, where we look at what do we all want. And then there come ambitions, there come common ground themes that come out of that. And on these themes, on these common ground themes, we build action plans. And that's the action phase. And here you see the flow in this slide, how we move from the past via the present and the future towards actions. An important part of explaining what is a future search helps to explain the principles. There are 4 principles on which a future search is built. The whole system in the room, different stakeholder groups. Explore the whole elephant before acting on a part. That also means think global and act local. So what is the whole of the picture on the whole, and see, hey, where do we have an influence? Where can we turn buttons in our situation? Focus on the future and common ground. Future scenarios, the visualization of what we aspire, and then look for common ground themes. And the principle of self-management. So in a future search, there's no PowerPoint presentations, there's no guest speakers. There's a lot of dialogue, and a lot of dialogue in small groups. And in these small groups, people organize themselves. And that's what we call the principle of self-management and the responsibility for action. Very brief, these 4 principles. We will zoom in on the first principle, the whole system in the room, and do an exercise on it in small groups, in breakouts, and then after that we'll zoom into the other principles to explain them a bit more. Involve the whole system, what is important there is to get a picture of who are the stakeholder groups involved in this question. And here in the nature inclusive case, who are these stakeholder groups? And later on, Monique will explain what were these groups, but we will ask you to do this as an exercise. What are stakeholder groups? What do you think of stakeholder groups that that have to do with this question? And a good rule of thumb here is the R in, who should participate. Then you can think of the R in is an acronym for people with authority, the A, people who have the decision power. Also people who have access to resources, maybe to money and funds, but also people with access to information. Yeah, researchers, results from research, information documents, and the E of people with expertise. Often we see, maybe in a silo, what was mentioned earlier, that only the experts got together. But then after that is, yeah, you have a very nice idea, but is it doable? Is it possible to make it actionable? So that's why we have also people with authority and people with access to resources. But of course, experts should be part of this whole system. And the people with needs, the people who are the target group who have the need for an outcome of the future search. And ideally, in the whole system in the room, we distinguish 8 different stakeholder groups with different stakes, different interests in the topic. And amongst these different stakeholder groups, we look for the R in. So do we have people with decision power, with access to information, but they can be divided or distributed in the different stakeholder groups. We also look for diversity in gender and age to have the maximum diverse group, because one of the principles, the whole system in the group, diversity makes rich exchanges and rich solutions. And in the end, to have the invitees, the participants to the future search, we invite 8 people from each stakeholder group. So we get the 8 times 8 idea. Now I think Monique will move to, we have 2 examples. How this, we have here the example of the 8 stakeholder groups for a case in Tanzania, how to improve the ICT systems in secondary schools. And here you see an example. Of course, there are teachers. Of course, there are the school kids. The teachers and the school kids are the ones with the need. But there's also private sector and government who could maybe fund and who had to decide, the authority. And learning resource providers, content, information, experts. So here, this is one example. And another example, maybe all of you know IKEA, and it's a very obvious distribution or obvious different stakes and stakeholder groups you see here. And the designers, the logistics and the sales and the supply and the customer service. And what I learned from IKEA do once in a couple of years, they do a future search. And what is smart of them, in the design, the designers are fed by the logistics, the ones who run the trucks. Hey, you cannot make this bed this long because it doesn't fit in my my truck, or you should make this furniture not that long, or keep in mind how large it can be in my truck. And also the wish of customers. Hey, can we use one little pin and not all these different types of screws, but just one main screw that will help us? And so this way IKEA could optimize their services. And that's because they did not work in silos, but really connect the silos together in a meeting. So this is another example. Monique, I think it's time, maybe
Yeah.
after long speaking from my
Yeah.
side, that we make breakout groups again.
Yeah.
Please, over to you for the assignment.
Yeah. So, of course, you don't know the whole context, and it might be a bit challenging to do this assignment, but it's also just to think about it, and because this is the most important first steps in the process is to determine the central question, and then if you have the central question, what is the system around this question that we need to involve in order to answer the question and in order to work on the question. So our case was about the nature inclusive agenda of the Netherlands, and the central question of the future search was, how do we accelerate the movement towards a nature inclusive society? So who do you think should be the 6 of the 8 stakeholder groups? Who should participate in this future search? And I just, you do this in your group, and afterwards I explain the stakeholder groups that we have identified, or that the group self have identified themselves, and why. But it's also interesting to think about it, because this is the first step of the process. So in your group, so you all go back in groups.
Different groups?
Yeah, and you determine which 8 stakeholder groups. We have a link in the chat. It's a link to a mural, and you go to the corresponding group that you have. So if you're group number 1, you go to the circle of group number 1 to work on. In this circle, there are 8 post-its. And so together you decide which stakeholder groups should be on each of those post-its. So that is the first thing. And the second thing that I would like to introduce is the self-management roles. And this is crucial to a future search, but I would say to any large group interventions that we do, is that if you work in a group, make sure you divide the roles before you start. So who will lead the dialogue? Make sure that everyone can contribute. Who will write down on the post-its? And who will report to the group, to the plenary? Who will report back? And in this case, I will be the timekeeper, or we will be the timekeeper, because we will call you back after the time. So you don't need a timekeeper here. That's the advantage of online. But if it's offline, it's really important to have this timekeeper role as well assigned to someone. So before you start, dialogue leader, a recorder, and a reporter. So make sure you click on the mural link that is in the chat. And we give you 15 minutes for this assignment. And you will be in mixed groups with new people again. And good luck.
Okay, I'll open the rooms. Have good conversations.
Welcome back, everyone.
Yeah.
We'd love to hear from a few groups. Like what stakeholder groups have you identified around the central question? How can we accelerate the movement towards a nature inclusive society? So who would like to present? Which group?
Start with 1.
Yeah, we can start with 1. Present
Nice,
number 1. Who is the reporter of
Yeah, that was me. So,
can you zoom in, Eileen, that you make it bigger, because we cannot see it properly now.
Just in 1 from group 1, eh?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, so we first spent a few minutes on talking about what we actually mean with a nature inclusive society.
Yeah.
Which started with quite some nice conversation and could have been much longer, but then we went on to all the groups, and then yeah, it was a struggle to put in 8 categories, because there are actually much more. But to start on top, like, we want to have the central and local government involved, because they are also kind of having a more holistic approach to society and business. Then we go to the right to more citizens who are more affected by past nature disasters, and NGOs who can play a part in that. Then we want experts on ecology, biodiversity to really tell what is a fruitful balance and what is good, and also for nature, and also to be present as a voice for the nature. And then the younger education of a younger generation and education as a ambition for the future. That also relates a bit to the media that comes next, to really pull the innovation with maybe influencers and newspapers showing attention to moving towards this new society. And then we come to the other parts of the actors who were actively just, well, on the wrong part, or maybe degenerating nature until now, or have also a stake in it. But it could also mean a lot for heading towards this way, because we really need to include them. So farmers can have a very good role in regeneration, other industry leaders, social enterprises, and also the startup industry with cool innovations. Then we go to representative major financial institutions, so people can kind of also make a business model and help with financing these new projects. And then lastly, the private landowners and developers who will all have a stake in nature and in the ground and have ownership over it. So that were 8 actors.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
And as you said, this is something that the planning team is involved in for months. So you do a very short, brief exercise, but it's a hard one. Yeah, so that we do recognize, but we wanted you to just play a bit with it.
It was fun though. It was a nice conversation and challenging one.
Yeah. Okay, group number 2. Can you briefly?
Okay.
I will zoom in.
Yeah. We made the problem a little bit smaller, focused on nitrogen nature and the government of agriculture and nature as a start. So we have the national government organization. We have the local organization because they have different ways of dealing with the problem and different problem. We have the farmers, we have the agricultural industry, and we have the other industry that is also polluting. We have the environmental organizations. We had a discussion because most of us wanted nature to be a factor of its own, to give it rights. But even this, in our group, we had to we made it in the same stakeholder group as the environmental organizations.
Yeah.
Because we were short of the, well, we had only 8 groups. We had academia, universities, and youth organizations. And I don't know what's in the
infrastructure developers, I think.
Yeah, it's also one of the like the agriculture industry. You also have the waterstaat.
Water.
So the making the roads and looking for the quality of the roads and the water and etc. It's also kind of an organization in the Netherlands.
Okay. Thank you. Is there another group? We still have time for 2 groups to present. So which group is saying, yeah, we have a bit of a different stakeholder map?
Yeah, we in group 3, I don't think we have that much of a different approach to what was discussed now. But it's just some of the conversations that we had when we were thinking about who are the people with expertise and experience and what's different to people with information, because we kind of see the two quite similar. So on the one hand, you have the people with the expertise who can be the researchers and the NGOs. And then people with information could be more like people with information on the ground rather than the academic experience or expertise in the topic. And then also we discuss nature as a stakeholder. And so the animals, the plants, but who can advocate on their behalf. And we try to really scale down the problem, even though we were talking about a nature inclusive society, we try to scale it down to a neighborhood or to a local area to make it a little bit easier. We focused on a smaller area and kind of thinking quite broadly who are the people in need with needs, and those obviously would be the locals, and trying to figure out who the people in power were, so the authority and the resources.
Okay,
that
nice
was
way
the
to do it.
approach.
Yeah. Okay, thank you. So one more group. Anything to add?
Yeah, I would back from group 4, would back a lot. I would say just a hurrah on the giving voice to people that don't have voice. That means animal, plants, and future people that don't exist yet. And bring them through speculative thinking, bring them through the room and give them the voice.
Okay, thank you.
And maybe from group 7.
Group 7. Can we go to group 7?
Yeah.
There's a lot of overlap there, but on the left you see the hedonists, hunters, and eco-modernists, to just represent the people who think differently about the importance of nature inclusivity. And I realized that eco-modernists, is what I introduced, it's not everywhere known. In the Netherlands, we have these discussions between eco-modernists and people who promote nature inclusivity. So the eco-modernists believe that we should intensify even more and more and more, because then we provide in the needs for food and those kind of things, and then we have more left for nature. They don't bring the model how you then can make sure that the leftover will really be for nature and not for other things, but that's their belief. And you get interesting discussions there.
So it's really a different voice that you include here. Yeah. Okay, thank you.
Maybe one kind of different add-on from group 6 is like artists and actors. As a way to like method acting and trying to empathize with nature. Maybe you need them like as a translator. That was our thinking. And maybe a little bit around the citizens, we zoomed in a bit on cyclists also, because the Netherlands is a country of cyclists, of course. So yes.
Okay, nice. Yeah, if we would add them all up, then we would have much more than 8 stakeholder groups. So you see how difficult it is to identify these groups and cover the whole system.
Bonnie, could I just add something in there on that point?
You can, yes.
So group 1, if you look at them, was the only group to talk about media or influencers as one of the main stakeholders in right at the beginning. And it sort of goes back to that last point about actors and other things, but anybody that can communicate this idea should be in a stakeholder group in our view. And so that's the traditional media, that's social media influences. It could be actors, it could be whomever it is.
Influencer.
If they're not in at the start, it's really difficult to get them to help connect all of these things and these people together. So perhaps, as we go through this in the future, that could be on your slide of, who influences, it sort of comes under that heading.
Interesting addition. Yes, thank you.
I'd like to elaborate on that point, that excellent point from Christopher, because I think artists can also be very good communicators that go beyond the here and now, because they can help you communicate future realizations that are mostly ignored by the normal media because they're very much in the now. And yeah. So yeah. I think they're in the realm of media, but beyond that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I can stop sharing, I think.
Yeah, let's... So thank you for your input. This is... so I will show you now which stakeholder groups were identified in this process. Then I have to say that none of the processes that I've been part of, and I think Eileen, goes smoothly, that you get all the stakeholders you want. So that's the first thing, that because it is, first you have to work with the system or a representation of the system, and they decide which stakeholder groups they think are relevant for the system. We as facilitators try to, create awareness around minority voices, but also the polarities that are in an issue, as was mentioned by one of you. And so where is the no voice? Where is the against voice? And it's not always easy to get that group in, those groups in. And it's also not easy in the conversation, because often the system, like Nature Inclusive, they like to work with like-minded people. And but the issue, of course, in society is that there are a lot of people who don't see the urgency and who have a totally different view. But to get them in is a challenge. So, but we have ways to overcome that and to deal with that. In this process of Nature Inclusive Agenda, we were kind of coming in where there was already a process. So they had already identified domains from this first ambition document that they developed. And then we came in to facilitate the process towards a future search. So we had to work with what they already themselves had identified, and we tried to enrich that together with them. So I will share the map that we had, the stakeholder that we came up with, or that they came up with, I have to say, it's not us. Because part of self-management is also that the system themselves, they identify what are important stakeholders. So we had the agriculture, and what some of you mentioned, the water, the domain of everything that has to do with water management in the Netherlands, water infrastructure, the quality of water. We had the construction and public space planning domain that were, they really had the construction, building. Then we had the infrastructure, the roads, the bridges. We had energy, leisure economy, which are important in the nature, in the division of nature, but also keeping nature in the Netherlands. We had government, and we had cross-sector. So that were kind of people who don't look at the domains because they identified these domains beforehand, but who will have an overview. So there the NGOs came in, the academics came in, we had a journalist, we had someone from an NGO, like a nature NGO. So that was one stakeholder group. So we put them together. And as you mentioned, what was interesting, youth was important. So when they were identifying participants, there was a real focus on, in each stakeholder group, get young people in that domain. So instead of having it as a separate group, stakeholder group, the focus was on, can we get gender balance? Can we get age balance, but also regions balance in every stakeholder group? So that's how the invitations and the lists were composed. So and now we go back to the process, how that works, because we started the process with a planning team, and the future search is taking 2 days or 3 days, but the planning phase took 6 months, because, and I saw already in some of your comments, the most difficult part is to get the system in the room, to identify the system and to get them in the room. So the invitations process and making first a long list and then a short list of who should be there, is a huge process. And that is done by the planning team. So the first step is the planning team. And they have to decide, do we want a future search? Is that the best approach for the challenge we have at hand? So first the planning team has to agree, yes, we want to do a future search. Then they have to decide what is then the focus of this future search. Then they identify the stakeholder groups, and then you get in each stakeholder group a contact person, and that contact person has to start identifying people, names, not functions, but names, who to approach. Decide on the dates and the venue, and then have we said you go through a process of past, present, future. But what is the scope of past? Are we going to look 50 years back from now, or are we going to look 20 years back from now? They have to decide. Are we going to look ahead 30 years from now, or are we going to look ahead in the future 20 years from now or 10 years from now? So that planning team is responsible for determining the scope of these timings. And then they coordinate logistics. So if you talk about self-management, then this is already the start of it. It's not experts and consultants coming in and do the work. No, we have been facilitating this team to do the work. It was their future search. They decided on it. They decided who would be there. And we tried to, of course, you know, with our critical questions and some provocation, to make sure that the right people were there. But that is how we started. And it was a process of 6 months, this planning phase.
Can I ask something?
Yes, you can.
So the planning team is, you're not part of the planning team. You are.
We are as facilitators.
Okay. So the planning team is the initiators.
That are the initiators, and sometimes the initiators. So this came from the government, very much. And then it was said, okay, but if you want a future search, then who should be involved in the planning? So they had representatives from the government, but then also from each domain. That was mentioned. So water, energy, farmers. So that those groups were presented in the planning team.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, and we, so the initiators and us in the beginning is too small of a group for a planning team. So we always encourage to invite a few more people from different angles with different perspectives to join the planning team in order to have the representation of the whole system already in the planning team. So the planning team consists mostly of 6 to 10 people. Still a small group to be able to make progress and decide on things, but big enough to have all the stakes in. Yeah.
Okay, so this was about the first principle. And,
yeah, but maybe one more remark about the whole system in the room. Why we have 8 people of each stakeholder groups, so we can make 8 mixed dialogue groups. So many steps in the future search process are dialogues of small groups, and these small groups are sort of identical groups of the 8 different stakes. So in each group is one person from each stakeholder group. So you have the diversity in all the dialogue groups. That's the idea, why we have the 8 times 8.
I see
There's
a
a hand of
raised hand.
Barbara.
Yeah. Maybe
Can I?
Yeah, you can.
Yeah. Go ahead.
Yeah, thanks. I also shared something in the chat because I'm really sitting with lots of questions. I won't ask them all. But also being Dutch and having been part of some of these multi-stakeholder processes and coming from a kind of social justice feminist background, I always think about power. And that's one of the conversations we had. And if you put people in a room with different forms of power, but already the whole process of who defines who is there, who's represented and not. And I appreciate what you do as a facilitator and that you cannot have the whole system. But I do wonder how you see that in a process like this. If it's something that you try to fix in facilitation or address in facilitation to make sure that those voices that are less powerful have a more central role maybe in the process, because assuming everyone's equal in that room and then ignoring all the voices that are not out there, yeah, just raises a lot of questions, both in terms of social justice, but also in terms of actual systems change, because we had that conversation about turning things around a bit more profoundly. And it's a big question, but I'm just curious if you could say something about it in relation to this whole system in a room approach, because I mean, you could look at this in so many ways in terms of those 8 stakeholder groups. I mean, I could think, women with unpaid care burdens. I mean, you could think of many different ways of approaching stakeholders that are not just economic sectors.
Yeah. No, so that is what I said. This was a kind of predetermined, and of course you are missing stakeholders. But for the purpose of the agenda, so that's why the central question is important. And of course, the question is rather broad, but the result was to have this agenda. So this nature inclusive agenda. And if you look at what the agenda then contains, it's again involvement of different stakeholders in a process that will follow from the future search. So the focus question and it's kind of framing and determines who will be there. And but it's difficult. It's a real challenge to get the whole system in the room. We, for example, had difficulties to get people in power in the room, like ministers, like we call them the bobos, the big decision makers. So we have included a session where we invited them for a short presentation of the work that everyone had been doing. Sometimes you get them in the room and sometimes not. So if not, then we think of a way to get it by, for example, bringing in a film, a very provocative film, or from an activist, or have a small kind of input that will bring that voice in. We had, for example, in this process, we didn't have the no voice. They were all like-minded people who really care for the nature. So we had in every group an empty chair with the absent voice. And in all the discussions, this chair got a place. So you could also do that for nature, for example, that you say, this chair is nature. And every group has to bring that perspective of nature in. If you can't get the voice in the room in terms of people, bring them in another way. And of course, we had a lot of preparatory work, and we had posters that were prepared with a lot of information and input, where people were invited. We had corners where people were invited to walk through, and unconsciously that information became also present in the conversations. So it's a challenge, but there are ways to deal with it. I don't know if I've answered your question.
But thanks for bringing it in, Barbara.
Yeah.
Okay. The idea of our program is to go over to the other principles. Monique, shall we go over to that?
Yeah.
Can you share the screen with the 4 principles again?
Yeah, I will.
So we talked a bit about the principle of the whole system in the room, and you had the chance to think of this in this case and learned how we did it in this case, determined the whole system around the question. A second one is the whole elephant, globalize, think global, act local. And that is about widely exploring what is coming and influencing us. So what are trends and developments that really influence us? And here you see a picture why we have this elephant, and maybe you know this picture and this poem of the 6 blind men who approach an elephant, and all of them have a different part of this elephant. One feels the trunk and says, hey, this is a snake. Another one feels the ears and says, hey, this is a fan. Another touches the tail and thinks, hey, this is a rope. So the metaphor is for, hey, we all have just one piece of the puzzle. And if we bring all these pieces together, then we see the whole elephant, then we see the whole picture. So in this, so this is a starting point for the future search, to have a common picture, a shared picture of what situation are we in, and what is influencing us. Briefly, this principle, the third principle, focus on the future and common ground. I already mentioned briefly. We look for the common ground in the future, all the scenarios of the future we want, expressed by the different groups. So the mixed groups, they envision the future, they share that, they present it in plenary, and then we have this question, what do we all want? And then we look for the common ground. Yeah, and there was a question, hey, how to deal with minority voices here, or the odd voice, but we will come to that later when we share parts of the report of the Nature Inclusive case. The fourth principle, well, Monique said already a few things about it in the planning group. So what they decide upon is part of the self-management. They decide upon what scope we have and which stakeholder groups to identify. But you experienced in your small group also the self-management roles. And that is what we assign all the time when the small mixed groups, or the groups of 8 people, or sometimes we go in stakeholder groups, when they have an assignment, a task to work on, we ask them to divide the self-management roles of the facilitator, and the timekeeper, and the person who takes note, and one who reports back in plenary. So, and this is for owning up that the participants themselves experience, hey, this is us, we have to do this. So that makes it easier to implement also what comes out. So there's nothing that's, so as facilitators, I learned to sit on my hands and not meddle or mix myself into stakeholder groups, because they're able to do their work. And if they have an issue, they'll come to us. So it's not me going over to small groups and helping them or coaching them or whatever, support them. No, sit on my hands and trust that the small groups will do it themselves. So this is briefly the four principles glanced. We will share a glimpse of the report later, where you get a feel of these principles, how they work out a bit more. But here a slide with the practical things as also a wrap up, or a summary. The theme is an urgent question that we can only answer together. We need each other. Not one person is able to tackle this question, this issue. And to formulate this question, well, you saw it quite nicely formulated. It's clear and scoped, demarcated. That is also part of the planning group, and it's a whole task as well to come to this well-articulated and scoped, demarcated question. Participants, well, we talked about that. The process of the future search, we follow the flow, and that is a structured process. There's even a book with guidelines for each step of the process. As we said, it takes about 20 hours, 2.5 days. And for each task, we give the groups, there's a worksheet with a task description. So they go in their small groups for, let's say, 40 minutes to make a future scenario, for example, and they get an instruction sheet, a worksheet with the timing and the subtasks. 2/3 of the process is working towards this common ground, and from the common ground come the shared ambitions, or the shared themes that are the starting point for translating them into actions. Yeah. I think we can go over to share the Yes, share the report. I will share it from my...
As it is a case study, we thought it's interesting to share you the report and just show you a bit with pictures what process we went through, but very briefly, because we also would like to give you the opportunity to reflect and come up with final questions. So very briefly, I will guide you through this report. It's in Dutch, so don't look at the language, but I will just explain a bit. We had a visual harvester, by the way, who was making drawings during this process. And we had Hannah with us, and maybe she can share that later. Maybe put a link in afterwards. She made a system map of this process. So we had more things as a result of the future search, but this was the report that they wanted for their agenda. So we started with the past. So this is more the principles, the participants. We went to the past. Normally we make, it's fixed in a future search that you make timelines, 3 timelines, one about the world, one about personal past, and one about nature inclusivity, the topic. And this is to really create a common feeling that you start with your personal life, but you discover in this personal life that you have a lot of commonalities. And if you look at the world, there's a lot that has been influencing us, and also the nature inclusivity. So this process of looking at the past really creates a feeling of that there is a common starting point for the conference. So we didn't do timelines because they had already a preparatory work. They were already working in these domains. So we did it in short interviews and then asked them to reflect back. So that was the past. From the past, we went to the present. So what is currently happening around us in terms of trends, developments that influence this movement towards a nature inclusive society? So what are the trends that we see? So this is part of this elephant. Everyone sees different trends. They can even be opposite trends. That is okay. This is really exploring the elephant, and it's often very overwhelming for people to see this. Like, whoa, what are we dealing with? What complex? What a complex situation we are finding ourselves in. So
and
after.
As you see this, what we do is a group brainstorm, making a mind map. So everyone can contribute. And what you see here is a mind map of all the trends and developments that people indicate. And some are related together to each other. And there you see clusters of a branch with some sub-branches in this mind map.
Yeah, so this is the method that we use to explore the elephant. And after the mind map, we ask every stakeholder group gets a different color sticker, and we ask them to sticker the trends that for them are the most important ones or most influential ones for their stake. And so you see the different colored stickers, and after the stickers, the stickering, they go in stakeholder groups and then look at themselves like, oh, if we look at, we as farmers, what are we currently doing in relation to the trends that are important for us? And what are we not doing? And that results in a very powerful session around prouds and sorries. So every stakeholder group is owning their successes, but also owning where they fail or where they have not succeeded or where they have let things just slide away or slow down. So this proud and sorry plenary session often, it dissolves already some tension that are in the room, because even if the government or a ministry says, we didn't do this well, we are sorry for this, it clears the air, and it really creates a good space and a good atmosphere to start looking at the future.
The honesty is there, and it builds bridges. People approach each other. There's a break after this one, and that is a really lively break. People approach each other. That you said that, and now I understand you better. And so the understanding and understanding is there, and begrip understanding, and people are more approachable to each other then.
Yeah. And I see that, how do you decide on trend scopes? Trend scopes, it's a brainstorm. So we say, as long as it is influencing our focus, and as long as people see that that is a trend that they find is relevant, we put it on. With the stickering, we see, and it's filtered out which trends are really the most relevant for what we're talking about. But we're not going to say, oh, that's not a valid trend, so we don't put it on. That's not the idea of the brainstorm. So after the past and the present, we go to the future, and that's a very creative, energetic part where in mixed groups, so we have mixed groups where a representation of every stakeholder group is present, and they start looking at the ideal future. So here the scope was 2030, and we asked people to dream about, okay, everything works out perfectly in 2030. This agenda is there, the nature is recovered and strengthened. How does that look like? And people are invited to dream together and to prepare a creative presentation of their dreams. And this is also a moment of a lot of positive energy, because they are looking at what they all want in the future. So after these future scenarios that are presented, the common ground dialogue will take place. So if we listen to all these dreams that we have, what are the themes that are coming back in all the dreams? What is the shared themes? What is the common ground? And there we have the dialogue where we look at what we have in common. And of course, there are topics we don't agree on, or they don't agree on. And in this case, we give the group the opportunity to talk about it, to ask questions. And we ask the final question, like, is there an objection, a strong objection, if we put this on the common ground? And if there is, we will talk about it. Or what do you need to come along? That's another question. It's from two different methods. One is called deep democracy and one is called holacracy. So in the facilitation, we use those two to make sure that we make space for the minority voice. And I can tell you, we had a common ground dialogue where the minority voice was positioned. And first, it was just one person who was saying it. And then we said, who else thinks like that? And then suddenly the whole room changed, and the minority voice and the minority view became part of the common ground, which was very powerful to see how that works. So after the common ground, we go to the action. And so if you
maybe one more thing about the common ground. We also asked, can you, is it okay? You don't have, we don't solve it where there is a slight difference. Yeah, okay, go ahead, Monique.
Yeah. We go from the common ground to the actions. So in this case, we had two rounds of action planning. One about the common ground. Maybe you can go up a bit. Common ground themes. This was the common ground. True pricing, behavior change. Now, it's in Dutch, but that's what the 9 themes. So we had first an action planning around these themes. And then we had another round with translation of these action plans to the different domains. So what does it mean for energy? What does it mean for water? What does it mean for agriculture? So that is very briefly the process we went through. And these action plans were then the input for this national agenda. Okay, so I think we can stop sharing.
Yeah.
Because we have an assignment for you.
Yes.
Monique?
Yeah?
Could I perhaps add something about the common ground?
Yeah.
What I really like in your method is that you first start with seeing the whole elephant. And then in common ground, you often see that there's lack of creativity, where you just split the problem into, okay, the right compromise is you get half and I get half. I always make the comparison with two people who fight about an orange.
Yeah.
And they decide they will get either each they will get half an orange. And then if you look at the whole elephant, the one only wants to have the fruit inside to make a juice or eat it, and the other one only wants the peel to make a cake.
Yeah.
They could both have the whole orange, but you need to see the whole picture first.
Yeah. So that is why we do the whole picture, and we also have something in the stakeholder groups where the interests become really clear for the rest of the participants from each other. What are and in the dialogue, the common ground dialogue, that will be explored because people start to talk about it. But why is it important for you? So the why question and what is the interest that you have will be discussed in this dialogue. Often this dialogue is a very crucial part and also a challenging part of the process. Yeah. But what we would like you to do now is in small groups reflect briefly for, let's say, 8 minutes on what we've just shared. And so what are some insights, but also maybe some very urgent questions that we can still answer in the remaining 10 minutes.
Okay.
So in your group, prepare questions that we later on can deal with in the plenary. Welcome back. Yes. The floor is open for a Q&A. So what are remaining questions? Please take the floor.
Maybe, sorry, you got your hand up.
Subra,
Yeah, so we and our group, we just discussed a bit of how do we measure the success of process, and there were like a lot of questions around it. And when I say success, I see that the impact of employing this kind of tool in a context like Netherlands, where complexity is less versus a country like India, where rules change and culture changes very rapidly in a very short, even in a short geographical region, things become extremely complex. And is this process standalone, or this process serves as an input to some other process? So if you can give some points around this, it would be great.
Shall I start, Eline? It can be a start of something. So, for example, we also have been doing 2 processes in Kenya, and it was about a program to empower women and women economic development in Kenya. And in order to design the program, we did a future search, and the result of the future search was the design of this program. And because it was designed by people by themselves and not an expert coming in doing research and saying, now this is what the program should be, it was designed by the people themselves. So that is, but in the nature inclusive example, it was part of a longer process, and it will continue because this agenda is now there. But it started already in 2019, and the future search was a step in between. So it depends. In terms of complexity, we work with what is there. So we work also we have been working in Indonesia, in Thailand, in Philippines, in Africa, and
Burundi. Burundi.
In Burundi. So and what the situation is there at the moment, and the complexity is brought in by the people themselves at that moment. So what is relevant at that moment will be brought in the room and in the process, and they will make sense of it. That's it is always complex. That's why we use a future search, because people can find their way in all these trends and developments and stakes. And I don't know if you have to add something, Eline.
Well, I see so many other hands, so I would like to give the opportunity also for others. I hope that's okay for you, Subra. Robert, you're the first one in my screen. Please go ahead.
Yeah, thank you. I was in room 5 with Alexandra and Saskia, and Julian in spirit. He was in the library. So I think Alexandra mentioned the 9 principles that were interesting, focusing on behavior change. So maybe get a little bit more insight on the other principles. But one of the questions is, you showed like the trajectory towards 2030. You know, how do people feel? Where can we be? What would be our ideal world? So if you would backtrack the process and see like, okay, this is what we need to do to get there. Are you implementing those sort of interactions in policies or something, or how does it work exactly? Maybe I missed it because I came in halfway, but that's one of my questions. Thanks.
Monique?
Yeah, I can. It depends what the question is. So if the question is to develop a policy, then it will be brought into a policy. Sometimes it is one of the common ground areas to develop a policy. So then it's one theme that comes in the common ground. So it depends. It depends what the focus is and what the results should be and what they want with the result. For example, in Yemen, we have been working on a policy to get more women into higher education. So the result of the future search was a policy document. And the research and the result of this agenda Nature Inclusive was an agenda for the Netherlands that was presented to the minister. That is now the foundation for actions to get Nature Inclusive Netherlands. So it depends.
Yes, thanks. Over to Lizelle.
Hi, thanks so much. So out of my group, we have two main questions. One is just like a clarification on how the 8 topics are chosen. So we were thinking it was when in the discussion after the domains were created.
I have difficulty with hearing because of the microphone, I think.
Oh, sorry. Are you
Monique,
hearing
can you
better
hear
now?
it? Maybe it's my...
Are you hearing better now?
Yeah.
Okay, sorry about that. So we just wanted a clarification on how the 8 topics were chosen. And then also just a bit on the differences between the future search process and the systems mapping / analysis process.
I have difficulty understanding the question. Monique, did you get it?
So the domains were chosen by the system themselves. So the initiator, the client, they decide which stakeholder groups or which domain should be involved for their question that they identify. Of course, we can broaden their perspective, and we instead in mapping the system, and we use some methodologies that we can help them to explore a broader view on stakeholders who should be involved. But in the end, it's them to decide. We don't decide as a facilitator. So
may I jump in here? It was about the dialogue groups, how the topics there came up.
Yeah, that is through the common themes. So if we hear all the dreams, then people go back into their group and they say, after having heard all these presentations, what are the themes that come back in all the dreams that you think everyone in this room wants?
Okay.
Yeah. And then the next step is that each group comes up in plenary, shows 10 items that they think these are the things that we all want. And then we're going with this common ground dialogue to cluster them. And then through this clustering, the themes become clear, come to stand out. Yeah. Okay, thanks. Let's go to Virgilio.
Hi, my question has to do with looking at the future process, whether it's something that they sit down and imagine that future, whether there's a visualization process guided, how do you do it? Because I use a method that is inspired in future search, and we have a particular process for that. So I'm curious to know which one you use for that particular part.
Okay. I can answer that one. Becoming curious to your method. What we do is ask them to act out. So, and they can choose which form. They can do it in a TV. Sometimes we see TV show, we see a quiz, we see a poem, we see a drawing with different people explaining this drawing. But we ask always that everyone should be in this acting out of this future. So as the audience looking at this one group presenting it, we are drawn into the situation. So that's so acting out the ideal future.
Yeah, and before that, I often do a guided visualization, which can help. So that's more individual. So every individual, it's like a guided meditation where you say, okay, you are now in 2030. What do you see? How do you feel? And then they go into their mixed groups, exchange their individual dreams, come up with this common dream, and then create this acting out and like a creative presentation. So, but that's not official maybe in the future search, but that's a step that I have been using a lot in this phase.
Monique,
Beautiful.
I see that. Yeah, okay. Monique, I see it's 4 o'clock, also looking at Hannah. I propose that we save the remaining questions for after the checkout. So Michelle, Cécile, Anne, you are welcome, if it's okay for you, to stay after the checkout for your question, but we are with so many people and we want to stop in time. I hope you accept. So Monique, for the checkout, we would like to hear a few words from some of you. How did you experience this?
But in one word.
One
word. Just say one word. Random. Popcorn style.
Open your mics.
Yeah. Okay.
Inspiring.
Inspiring, yes.
Yeah, raising consciousness.
Okay.
Holistic.
Holistic.
Participatory.
Anything else?
Educational.
Educational.
I also see things in the chat. You're welcome to post your word as well there. A few more words.
Pragmatic, new perspectives, different.
How did you experience the session?
Insightful, a gift.
Nice.
Now,
okay, thanks.
Close. Yeah, it was also a gift for us that you all showed up today and joined us in our presentation. It's always nice to share and learn together. And thank you for your questions.
Nice remarks in the chat. That's also puts me to thinking. Over to you, Hannah.
Yes. Yeah, thank you all for joining us today and really, having this conversation together. In the check-in, we also heard there were some people who are interested in getting connected to the Amsterdam Hub more and finding out what is going on there. So I will also share a link to a Miro board, and there you can find multiple links to join the Hub, follow us on LinkedIn, also some links to Perspectivity, to their LinkedIn account, to their website, somewhere where you can read more about future search. And in general, if you want to get involved more with what we're doing, there are a few options. So for example, if you yourself have a method or a case or some experience that you would like to share an event similar to this one, you're always very welcome to contact us with that, and we will set something up together. If you have kind of a new method that you're working on, something that you're still developing, and you need some people, some space to experiment with that, you can also contact us. And we have a lot of people who are interested who want to explore those kind of things together. And just in general, if you have any requests for types of events or any questions, feel free to send them to us. And also what we have coming up at the end of February is a learning lab. So if you've enjoyed coming together, learning together today, exchanging your experiences in this kind of format, then this will be a 6-week experience where you can do a lot more of that. We will be working on a specific example challenge together and really go through the process of how can we apply system thinking methods to do such a systems change initiative, and come together around that challenge and learning. So you will find the links to all of these elements on the Miro board that I'm sharing now in the chat. So there you will find different ways to connect with us. And then, thank you all. If you need to leave now, nice to see you. I'm sure we'll see each other again in some other events. But you are welcome to stay to listen to a few more questions that we will still answer now.
Bye-bye. Thank you. Have a nice day or evening or morning, wherever you are.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
I want to listen to Michelle and Anne's question.
Okay, can you ask Michelle?
Yeah, sure. So I was in a group with Marius and Adiposi. Oh, Adiposi just left because he had actually a great question. And it was about how do you accelerate what comes out of these sessions? Obviously, it would be different probably per context, but how do you think about the acceleration of the actions? And then the other question we had was, again, getting back to what Barbara had said earlier about checks and balances. And you know, in order to check the status quo, how might you weigh different groups differently? So I can imagine, for example, in nature inclusion, youth might be a very, very important stakeholder, given they have to live with the consequences of environmental degradation, and they're less powerful than most others in the room. So do you weigh their voice in relation to other stakeholders?
Mm-hmm. You are on mute, Eileen.
Sorry, I can answer the first question on how to accelerate. Well, the future search actually ends after the conference. So if we are asked for a future search, the process goes on. So often we advise and what we see groups doing, and often we are still incorporated afterwards, that we look for people who feel committed to one of those action plans, and one who wants to lead, the tracker, who wants to be the contact person for this action plan, and see if a group of other committed people is around, if we can form a small group to make this happen. And then in a month or in 2 months or 3 months time, we sometimes do a world cafe or an action cafe, a meeting. We asked the working groups, the action planning, the groups on each action to gather again. But this is always in interaction with the client, with the ones who initiated it, to organize this further. But this is often the case that we do a few months later a get together with the groups on each action and exchange amongst them. So in order to keep track of sort of monitoring and keeping track of the reinforcing actions, how are they influencing each other and maybe accelerating each other. So that is actually the implementation of the action plans. So then there's a movement, and we can support that in different ways, different than Future Search itself. Yes, that's okay.
Yeah, and the other question was about weighing the voices. That's really a process beforehand, that you make sure that if you have youth, that you bring that the youth is at least represented in all the groups and can be a stakeholder group, but also in the mixed groups. So that is a way to do it. So, but it's not always the case. So it's a challenge, but it's also how the system functions. So you have to. We always say the people who are there are the right people. And what is interesting, that the system will at one point say, hey, we miss the voice of the youth. They're not heard properly. And then we say, what are you going to do about it? So then it will be reflected in the action plans, like how can we get more youth on board, or how can we get the absent voice on board. And it's because the system will discover themselves that there are things missing, or that a voice is not represented well enough. And that is that's very powerful. It's not us who's saying, oh, they are marginalized, so we have to weigh their voice. No. So we work with what is there, and we help the system to become aware that they need each other, and to also become aware which voices are missing. So in the action planning, you see those voices often coming very prominent up as things that need to be done afterwards, that need to be tackled. Yeah.
Great. Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Anne? Hi there.
Hi.
Hi.
We know each other.
Yes. It's really interesting, guys. Yeah, I was also thinking, but maybe you answered that part about, because I'm thinking about reframing, but I'm guessing the answer will be like at some point the system will come up with, because I'm always afraid like, oh, there will be too much of the majority voice, and we have to bring in those really weird, novel fringe things. But yeah, I guess you answered that question. I had one more question. At what point would you advise against this tool? If you're sitting with a group, at what point would you say like, oh, this may not be the right tool for now?
Okay. I've had a preparation of a future search, which we cancelled. Because one of the stakeholder groups was going to decide who is not in, and who decided for one party not to be in, and the rest of the people in the stakeholder in the planning group thought this group should be in. So that was very tough, but we in the planning group decided, well, and this was government who decided that Shell could not be in a climate neutral future search thing. And then we thought, well, if you are going to be that dominant, then we don't have the trust enough that this will be in a fair process.
Mm-hmm. And is there a point that you say like,
go ahead.
Yeah, we need another tool for this group, or?
So this is one example where the future search was not the right methodology, or was not, the system was not ready to do a future search actually. And some people are leaving. Okay. When there's not enough interdependency. So when people say, we have this group together and we think a future search is right to do, and then we think, well, this group is not very much represented, it's not diverse enough, or there is not a stake in the outcome of the future search. So often academia, or dwarsdenkers, people who think differently, or artists, they want to invite them as groups, but then they don't have a stake in the rest after that future search. Then we also think, we can do another kind of seminar, which is fine, exchange knowledge, great, but together agenda setting, action, common ground, and action planning.
There needs to be an interdependency, so that's what we check.
Yeah.
And maybe to add that we had a process in Kenya. It was about the macadamia sector to make them. It's a nut. So it's a. I love it. Not everyone knows what a macadamia is, but and this sector was very scattered, and it was identified as a sector with high potential for quality produce and worldwide competition, and also competition for the European market. So that was kind of an expert who had decided that that was a good sector. Then we were asked to facilitate a future search, and the sector was one chaos. So the planning team didn't function at all. The meetings were cancelled. People didn't show up. Every time there was a different person. So it was like, okay, what are we going to do? So we said, you know what, we're going to cancel or postpone the future search, unless you get organized, unless the sense of urgency is felt in such a way that you do the work as a planning team. Because if the planning team is not functioning, we are not going to do that because they were looking at us like, help, facilitators, can you do it? Can you facilitate our meetings? No. Who's the chair of your meeting? Where are your invitation lists? Where do you want to have the conference? Who is going to do that? They couldn't get it done. And then we just withdrew as a facilitator. And we thought, okay, this is not going to work. And then after, I think 2 months, suddenly there was this awareness of, we need to do something, because otherwise we are missing out on this great opportunity to work, to streamline our sector and in the end it happened. But there was a point that we said, I think it's not a good idea to do this. So we went back to the client and we said, let's just withdraw and wait what happens. So we let the system struggle. And after a while they came back and they said, we're ready. And then it went very smoothly. But the system has to be ready. And if the system is not ready, or they want not to work with a system or as a system, then it's not the right approach.
Does this answer your question, Anne?
Yeah, this is really helpful. Thank you.